Get your special sock out, nerds. It's gonna get good.
We all know the classic Spider-Man origin story. A nerdy teenager from Queens, growing up with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, constantly getting bullied at school, and living a quiet life that feels invisible to everyone around him. Until one day, everything changes. He gets bitten by a radioactive spider in a lab accident that should probably violate every safety law ever written, and suddenly, his life is no longer normal. He has powers, strength, agility, reflexes beyond human limits, but that's not what defines him, because Spider-Man has never really been about powers. It has always been about loss. In every classic version of Spider-Man, there is a moment that reshapes everything, Uncle Ben's death, and with it comes a line that becomes more than just dialogue. It becomes a rule for the character across every universe.
With great power
comes great responsibility.
Wait, what? How do you know that?
Uncle Ben said it the day he died.
That is the foundation, the emotional core, the reason Spider-Man exists as more than just a superhero. But then, the Marvel Cinematic Universe introduced something very different, a Spider-Man who doesn't follow that traditional path. Unlike previous versions, Tom Holland's Peter Parker is not introduced through a slow origin story. There is no full retelling of the Spider-Bite, no extended journey from powerless teenager to neighborhood vigilante. We meet him already in motion. By the time of Captain America Civil War, Peter is already Spider-Man, already active, already connected to a world far bigger than Queens. And instead of street-level crime being his starting point, his introduction is a global superhero conflict involving the Avengers. That alone changes everything about his journey. Even his home life is different. He still lives with Aunt May, but this version of her is younger, modernized, and written in a way that feels less like a grieving widow shaping Peter's moral foundation and more like a grounding presence in his everyday life. And Uncle Ben, the emotional cornerstone of every previous version of Spider-Man, is never fully shown.
He's got you on his computer. I'm his probation officer. Don't forget Aunt May.
There are hints, references, and implications, but the defining moment of loss that usually builds Peter's identity is not explored on screen in the same way. That absence matters, because without directly experiencing that moment with him, the way responsibility is formed feels different, less like a reaction to tragedy and more like something that develops through experience and mentorship. And then comes one of the biggest shifts in Spider-Man's history, Tony Stark.
Oh, Mr. Parker.
What are you doing? Hey, I'm Peter.
Tony.
In Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter is not just a young hero figuring things out on his own. He is actively mentored by Iron Man, one of the most powerful and wealthy figures in the entire MCU. Instead of building his own suit from scraps in a small apartment, Peter is given advanced star technology. Instead of struggling to survive financially while juggling hero work and school, he is placed inside a system where support already exists. And instead of being isolated, he is immediately connected to the Avengers ecosystem. This is a massive shift from traditional Spider-Man storytelling. In earlier versions, Peter Parker is defined by independence, struggle, and constant balancing of survival with responsibility.
He stole that guy's pizza!
In the MCU, he starts his journey with access, guidance, and resources that most versions of Spider-Man never have. And that creates a different kind of story. Because he is no longer just a neighborhood hero slowly building his identity, he is a young hero being shaped inside a fully established superhero world. This also means some of the classic Spider-Man elements are either missing or restructured. There is no Oscorp looming in the background as a central part of his world. Norman Osborn, Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and other foundational characters from the traditional Spider-Man mythos are not part of his early development in the same way. Even the idea of Peter being tied to a single lab accident that defines his entire origin is softened.
It's a long story. I was
Lordy.
Because the MCU is not building his story from scratch. It is integrating him into an already existing universe. So why did Marvel make these changes? The answer is not random. It is structural storytelling. By the time Spider-Man entered the MCU, audiences had already seen multiple origin versions of the character. The radioactive spider-bite, Uncle Ben's death, and Peter's early struggles had been adapted several times across different films. Repeating that again would not have felt fresh. It would have felt familiar. So Marvel made a creative decision. Instead of retelling the origin, they skipped it. They chose to explore what happens when Spider-Man is introduced after the origin has already happened, inside a world where superheroes are already normal. The question they were trying to answer was different. What if Spider-Man never starts alone? What if his journey begins in the middle of the Avengers era? But this decision comes with consequences, because when you remove or reduce the traditional origin structure, the emotional foundation shifts. Instead of Uncle Ben being the primary driving force behind Peter's sense of responsibility, that role becomes more distributed across his experiences and relationships. Tony Stark, in many ways, becomes a substitute mentor figure, not replacing Uncle Ben directly, but filling a similar narrative space as someone who guides Peter's early development as a hero.
You're an Avenger now.
And this is where things become interesting after Avengers Endgame. Because once Tony Stark is gone, Peter loses that structure completely. There is no mentor guiding him, no advanced support system constantly upgrading his tools, no voice in his ear helping him make decisions. Just Peter, trying to figure out who he is as Spider-Man in a world that is now much bigger and more dangerous than when he started. And that is where the classic Spider-Man energy begins to re-emerge in a different form. Not through a recreated Uncle Ben moment, but through the absence absence of guidance and the weight of responsibility settling fully on him. So the MCU did not exactly erase the classic Spider-Man story. It restructured it. Instead of a single defining tragedy shaping Peter Parker into Spider-Man, his identity is shaped through a series of experiences spread across different mentors, events, and choices. Classic Spider-Man becomes a hero through personal loss early in his journey. MCU Spider-Man becomes a hero through immersion in a larger world before he fully understands what being Spider-Man even means. And that leads to the final question. Was this version of Spider-Man missing the classic origin, or was he designed for a universe where origin stories no longer happen in isolation, but inside a world already overflowing with heroes, consequences, and chaos? Because in the end, this Spider-Man did not start with responsibility as a defining moment. He had to grow into it while the world around him never stopped moving. And maybe that is what makes him different. Not a replacement for the classic Spider-Man, but a version shaped by a universe that refused to slow down long enough for a traditional beginning.